What you are looking at is a chart listing the top 20 coaches on ProFootballReference.com. This chart describes the amount of games and the amount of wins each coach has. Some coaches have won more games even though they have played less, and some have played more but won less. However, this isn't a complete chart. We're missing two. Don Shula was the Miami Dolphins coach and was born on January 4th, 5'11", and 190 pounds. George Halas, who had the nickname Papa Bear, was born in 1895 and founded the Bears. Here is the total amount of years every NFL coach has spent coaching. This only counts for years they worked and not the total span of their entire career. Most coaches spend around 12 to 14 years coaching, but some have stayed for longer. For example, at number 10 we have Andy Reid, who has worked for 22 years. However, at the very top of this list is none other than George Halas, who coached for 40 years. And what makes this crazier is that he took 7 years off during the career, so he actually coached for 47 years. Right behind him is Don Shula at 33 years. Don Shula coached before and after the NFL season changed from 14 to 16 games. During his 16 game seasons, he only had one losing record of 6-10, and his best season was a 14-2 record. However, during the 14 game seasons, he did the unthinkable and won all 14 regular season games. He then won the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. It is the only undefeated season any NFL team has ever had, and it will live on as one of the greatest seasons in NFL history. George Halas coached for different amounts of games and won different amounts. The bottom row is the amount of games, and the higher the dot means more wins for that season. However, he did have some consistent 12 and 14 game seasons. During the 12 game seasons, he had a 10-2 season and a 3-9 season. For his 8-14 game seasons, his best season was 11-3 and his worst being 5-9. This may seem bad, but this doesn't account for all the seasons that he coached for different amounts of games, and most of them were winning records. This gives George 318 wins and Don Shula 328 wins. Here is the Miami Dolphins Super Bowl history from 1970 to 1985. The Miami Dolphins have played in 5 Super Bowls, in which the first 3 happened in back-to-back seasons. They won 2 and then lost the last 2 in 1982 and 1984. However, there's one thing that all these Super Bowl appearances have in common. Go ahead. Yes. You think you got it? Okay. It's Don Shula. Don Shula got the Miami Dolphins to all 5 of these appearances. 5 Super Bowls is incredibly impressive, but some have done that and gone further. Curly Lambeau was 5'10", 187 pounds, and was born in 1898. He coached the Green Bay Packers nearly his whole career before switching to the Chicago Cardinals and then to the Washington Redskins. However, he won 6 NFL championships, including 3 in consecutive seasons with the Packers. The NFL championship was basically the precursor to the Super Bowl and was considered obsolete in 1967. As a co-founder and a player, he threw the first pass, the first touchdown pass, and scored the first field goal in Green Bay Packers history. During the founding of the Packers, I found out the reason they named it is kind of funny. Curly had wanted to call the team the Green Bay Indians to respect the Indian Packing's company purchase for the uniforms for the team. So Agnes just said, "Why don't you call it the Green Bay Packers?" And that is how the Green Bay Packers were founded. The funny thing about all of this is that Curly is sort of an outlier on the first chart. Look at him. He's all alone between the 2 packs of dots. George Halas also had the honor of winning 6 NFL championships. However, his story is even more impressive. Here is every time the Chicago Bears went to the championship or the Super Bowl. They've been there 16 times. 14 of them were under the office of George Halas, and 8 of them were wins. It clearly shows that he was a great coach. But the amount of wins isn't always what makes a coach great. So, I created this monstrosity. This gargantuan chart describes the win-loss percentage of every coach with 50 games or more. From the top, you see the greatest coaches to ever live. Then, as you go down, you see familiar faces. And at the bottom, you see the worst of the worst, the scum of all coaches. The man at the very top of this chart is Guy Chamberlain. Born in 1884 and being 6'2", this guy had it all. In the 6 years he coached, he won 4 NFL championships, which is ludicrous. He could have an even higher percentage if not for his final season being a blowout. However, before he was a coach, he was an NFL player for 3 years, in which he won 2 NFL championships. Guy Chamberlain is NFL's golden boy. The only thing he can do is win, unless fate gives him the boot at the very end. You probably haven't heard of Guy Chamberlain until just now, but the second place coach may raise a few eyebrows. You know his name. That's right. John Madden, the creator of Madden, has the second highest win-to-loss percentage than any other coach. During his time with the Oakland Raiders, he never had a losing record. Even with all this, though, he only managed to get 1 Super Bowl, which is more than most coaches can say, but it's still disappointing. He got to the postseason 8 times, lost 6 AFC championship games, and lost in the divisional round. It's sad that John Madden only got 1 Super Bowl, but he will still be known as one of the greatest figures in football history. Before we continue, I would like to apologize for the bad mic quality. I have just gotten this mic for Christmas and I'm still figuring out how to use it, so sorry for the inconvenience. The bottom of this chart is filled with terrible coaches, some worse than others, but at the very bottom of this chart is the worst coach ever. This coach shatters reality, being worse than anything we could dream of. His name was Bert Bell. His 6-year-long career as a coach was a catastrophe with 0 winning records. He had 3 one-win seasons and not anything better. He had his first 5 seasons with the Eagles until losing his first 2 games with Pittsburgh Steelers, leading to his resignation. But here's a picture of Nick Bosa being drafted to the 49ers. You're probably wondering what this has to do with Bert Bell. Well, Bert Bell is the creator of the NFL Draft and was a successful NFL commissioner and advertiser. The world tried to get him to be what they wanted him to be, but first he had to go through torture to find what was right for him. Since we talked about the second best coach of all time, we are going to talk about the second worst coach of all time. Most of the bad coaches down here are mainly from the 2000s, and the second worst coach on record is a familiar face. Hugh Jackson is considered one of the worst head coaches ever. In 2011, he had an average season with the Oakland Raiders, which was then followed by a god-awful 3 seasons with the Cleveland Browns. He went 1-15 and somehow got to coach another season and went 0-16. Since 1944, there have only been 5 NFL teams with winless seasons, and Hugh Jackson is the second coach to have a 0-16 record. The first one is a very different story. Rod Marinelli coached the Detroit Lions from 2006 to 2008, and in those 3 years, he never had a winning record. In his last season, he wrote history by going 0-16. Even with wide receiver Calvin Johnson, he still couldn't make a difference. We have seen the top and bottom of this chart, but the questionable area is in the very middle. The 94th coach on this chart is questionable. Most of you probably don't know who John Ralston is, and that's fine. While researching this, I didn't even know who he was. In his 5 seasons with the Broncos, he had 2 losing records, 2 tied seasons, and 1 winning season. And that's it. I found nothing else special about him. This chart is the amount of ties every coach with 2 ties or more has had. It stays relatively normal with the majority having 2 or 3 ties. However, it starts rising exponentially as it gets higher. At the very top is none other than George Halas. 31 ties is an enormous amount. That is more ties than all the overtime ties from 1976 to 2020. However, there is a correlation of ties to the year. There were far more ties in the first few years of the NFL than there are now. As you go down, the coaches get more modern. You have to go all the way to the 60th coach to find a coach after 2000. Marvin Lewis has 3 tied games in his 15-year career, starting in 2003. Here is a chart with every coach that has won a Super Bowl. There are 33 coaches on this list, but the coach with the highest amount of Super Bowls is double the height difference from any other number. As we all know, Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls with the Patriots, but his career is a bit crazier than this. Bill Belichick was born in 1952, and before he coached the Patriots, he was the Cleveland Browns head coach for 5 years. At this point in time, seeing Bill Belichick with the Cleveland Browns jacket just looks wrong. He only had one winning record, and it was looking average as his record was 36-44. But as we all know, he went to the Patriots, and he had 19 seasons with more than 8 wins in a row. I don't think any other team will ever achieve this in a while. So, what have we learned from this? Well, some coaches are better than others, and some are worse. Sometimes the coaches are great, but the players are awful. Sometimes we gotta deal with these things. All I can say is that this whole video is useless, and you've gained absolutely nothing. So congratulations.